The road was quiet. Wind blew through the tall trees, and the sound of leaves filled the air. Lily sat in the back seat of the car, her hands resting on her lap. Her eyes stared out the window, but her mind was far away. She hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the accident. Her parents, Sarah and Mark, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. They didn't speak much either. They knew talking wouldn't help right now. Instead, they hoped the change of place would do something that words couldn't. They were moving to a small town called Stone Hollow. It was far from the busy city. The houses were spread out, and the forests were thick. It was quiet, maybe too quiet, but Sarah had read that calm places helped healing. They were doing everything they could for their daughter. Lily used to talk all the time. She laughed, sang, and told stories. But after the car crash, something changed. She survived, but her voice didn't. Doctors said it was from shock. She had no injury to her throat, but she just wouldn't speak. And not just that, she didn't remember much from before the accident. Her mind had shut a door, and no one knew how to open it. A week after they moved in, Sarah brought home a surprise. It was a dog, tall with brown and black fur, pointed ears and deep eyes. His name was Bolt. He had been trained as a therapy dog, and the shelter said he might help Lily. At first, Lily didn't seem interested. She watched Bolt from her chair, but didn't reach out. Bolt was calm. He didn't bark or try to force her. He just sat near her, his eyes full of understanding. After a few days, Lily began to move. She touched his fur, then hugged him. Her parents smiled for the first time in weeks. Lily and Bolt became close fast. He followed her everywhere. When she sat outside, he lay by her feet. When she had nightmares, Bolt scratched at her door until she let him in. He didn't need words. He seemed to know what she felt. With him, she didn't feel so broken. Then strange things began to happen. One night, Bolt jumped up and ran to the front door, barking. It was the first time he had made noise. Lily followed, her heart racing. But when she opened the door, there was nothing, just wind and trees. Another time, Bolt stood in her room, staring at the floor. He scratched at the wooden boards, barking once, then again. Sarah and Mark thought he was just restless, but Lily felt something different. He wasn't bored. He was trying to show her something. One morning, Lily sat by the window, brushing Bolt's fur. He suddenly stiffened. His ears pointed forward and his body tensed. Then she heard it, a faint whistle. It was a soft, short sound, coming from the woods. Lily froze. It was a sound she remembered, but didn't know from where. Bolt barked and pressed his head against the door. He wanted to go. She opened it. Bolt took off toward the trees, his tail high, his steps fast but careful. Lily followed, her shoes crunching against fallen leaves. The whistle came again. Same tone, same rhythm. It was not a bird. It was a person's whistle. But no one was there. They walked deeper into the woods. Bolt led the way, nose to the ground, stopping now and then to sniff. Finally, he stopped near an old tree. Its roots spread out wide, and between them lay a small metal box. Lily picked it up. Her hands shook as she opened the lid. Inside were old newspaper clippings, dirty and torn. A photo slipped out. It showed a young girl, brown hair, small smile, blue jacket. She looked just like Lily. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded. She knew this face. Somehow she knew it. Bolt sat beside her, quiet, his eyes on the trees. Lily stared at the photo, then at the dog. Questions filled her head, but her voice stayed silent. And then she heard it again, the same whistle. Only this time it was closer. Lily's heart raced as the whistle sounded again. Closer now, almost like it was right behind her. She turned, but there was nothing there, just the dark trees stretching into the night. Bolt stood perfectly still, his fur bristling, his eyes locked on something in the distance. The whistle came once more, sharper this time. It sent a chill through Lily, and for the first time since she'd moved to Stone Hollow, she felt afraid. "Who's there?" Lily wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, as though the silence around her was suffocating her voice. She could only stand, frozen, as Bolt stepped forward, his body tense. Without hesitation, Bolt began walking deeper into the woods, nose to the ground. Lily instinctively followed him. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. He was the only one who didn't seem scared of the unknown. They walked for what felt like hours, the trees growing denser and the shadows deeper. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Every now and then, Bolt would stop and sniff, then bark softly. Lily felt the eerie stillness around her. Even the birds were quiet. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. Finally, they arrived at a small clearing. A thick fog hung low to the ground, swirling around the trees. And there, in the center of the clearing, stood an old abandoned barn. Its wood was weathered, with vines creeping up the sides, and the door hung slightly open. Bolt growled softly. He was on edge, as if he had sensed something wrong. Lily stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The whistle had stopped. The air was still again. She hesitated, but Bolt's steady gaze urged her on. She took a deep breath and pushed open the barn door. It creaked loudly, and the smell of old wood and dust hit her immediately. Inside, the dim light revealed broken furniture, piles of old hay, and cobwebs in every corner. But it was what she found on the floor that made her blood run cold. A small, dirty object was partially buried beneath the hay. Lily knelt down, her hands trembling, and pulled it out. It was a tattered book, its pages yellowed and torn. The cover was too faded to read, but she could make out a few letters. Lily. Her name. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't possible. She stared at the book, trying to piece it together. Why was it here? How did it end up in this old barn? Then she heard something. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Lily's mind raced. She looked at Bolt, who had already crouched low to the ground, his eyes fixed on the barn door. She quickly stood up, hiding the book behind her back. The footsteps grew louder, crunching on the dry leaves outside. The door creaked open, and a tall figure stepped inside. It was Mr. Grayson, their neighbor. Lily had never felt anything but kindness from him. He was an older man, quiet but friendly. He helped Sarah with gardening and often brought fresh fruit from his farm. But tonight, there was something different in his eyes. Something dark. His gaze flicked over Lily and Bolt. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stared at them with a coldness she hadn't seen before. "What are you doing here?" Lily wanted to ask, but again her voice failed her. She could only watch him as he slowly approached. Mr. Grayson's eyes lingered on Bolt, who growled low in his throat. The man paused, a flicker of something in his expression. Recognition? Fear? "Get out of here, girl," he muttered, his voice rough. "You don't belong here." Lily's heart raced. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but she knew she had to leave. As she turned to run, Bolt lunged forward, his body tense. Mr. Grayson's eyes widened in surprise, but he stepped back, his hand moving to his coat pocket. Lily didn't wait to see what he was doing. She grabbed Bolt's collar and yanked him toward the door. They ran fast as they could, back through the fog, through the trees and away from the barn. As they reached the edge of the woods, Bolt stopped, looking back one last time. Lily glanced over her shoulder too. Mr. Grayson stood in the clearing, still watching them. His face was unreadable, but his presence felt wrong, threatening. Lily didn't know what was happening, but she knew she wasn't safe. Not anymore. Lily and Bolt ran all the way back to the house, the fog thick around them, the air cold and still. When they reached the front door, she stopped, her hands shaking. Bolt stood beside her, panting, but his body was still tense, his ears flicking back as if he could sense something dangerous close by. Lily opened the door, stepped inside and locked it behind her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but her mind raced. What had Mr. Grayson been doing in that barn? Why had he looked at her like that? And why had Bolt reacted so strongly? Lily knew she couldn't just forget what had happened, but she didn't know what to do next. She was trapped in silence, and Bolt was the only one who seemed to understand what was going on. He kept his eyes on her, as if waiting for her to make the next move. She sat down on the couch, her heart still pounding. The book she had found in the barn was hidden beneath her jacket. She needed to know more about it. It might be the key to everything, but she couldn't just tell her parents. Not yet. They wouldn't understand, not without the full story. Lily didn't have words, but she had actions, and she knew what she had to do. The next morning, Lily woke up early, long before her parents. Bolt was already at her side, his eyes watching her, as if waiting for her to lead the way. She took a deep breath, grabbed the book from under her jacket, and slipped out the door. She needed answers, and she knew where to find them. The woods were still misty, the trees casting long shadows across the path as she made her way back to the barn. Bolt walked beside her, his steps quiet but purposeful. They were on a mission now, and Lily felt a sense of determination she hadn't felt in weeks. It was as if something inside her had finally woken up. When they arrived at the barn, everything felt different. The air was still, and the fog seemed to have thickened. But there was no sign of Mr. Grayson. No footsteps, no sounds. Just the eerie silence. Lily pushed open the barn door once again. It creaked loudly and she winced at the noise, her heart skipping a beat. She stepped inside, Bolt close behind her. The barn seemed darker now, the shadows deeper. Lily walked over to where she had found the book the night before. She placed it on the floor and opened it carefully. The pages were old and some of them had been torn or damaged. But the first page caught her attention. There was a name written in faded ink, Lily Anderson. Her heart stopped, her own name. The book wasn't just some random object, it was hers, or at least it had been. But why was it here? Why had Mr. Grayson kept it? And why had he tried to warn her away from the barn? Lily flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling. The book contained memories, scattered pictures, notes, and even a few drawings. Some of the pages were blank, but others showed images she didn't recognize, people she didn't remember, places she'd never been. The drawings were strange too. Sketches of the barn, the woods, and even the house they had just moved into. It was like a diary, her diary, but something was wrong. The pages were out of order, and many of the pictures seemed off. Some were faded, as if they'd been exposed to sunlight for too long. Others were smudged, the ink running as though someone had tried to erase them. She turned to the next page and froze. The drawing on this page was of a figure, tall, dark, and wearing a long coat, a shadowy outline with a hat that hid most of the face. It was unmistakable. It was Mr. Grayson. But the picture was different from the others. It looked fresh, new. Lily's breath quickened as she turned the page again. The next picture showed the same figure, but this time it was standing in front of her house. The trees were drawn with sharp, jagged lines, and the house seemed small, isolated. In the corner of the page, there was another drawing, this one of a girl small and fragile, with the same brown hair and blue jacket that Lily had seen in the other photo. It was a picture of her. Her heart pounded in her chest. The truth was becoming clear. Mr. Grayson hadn't just been watching her from the woods. He had been watching her for years. He had been keeping track of her, keeping a record of her life. And now it seemed he was getting closer. Bolt growled low, snapping Lily from her thoughts. He had been watching the door. His hackles were raised and his eyes were fixed on the opening. Someone was coming. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she heard the footsteps approach the barn. Bolt stood perfectly still, his muscles tense, his body rigid. The sound of boots crunching on the gravel outside grew louder, and Lily's breath caught in her throat. There was no way she could leave the barn without being seen. She looked around frantically for a place to hide. Her eyes landed on a stack of old crates in the corner. They were large enough to cover her, but Bolt would be too noticeable. Lily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She grabbed Bolt's collar and whispered, "Stay quiet." She crouched down, pressing her back against the crates. Bolt stood beside her, his ears flat against his head, eyes alert. They waited in silence, the tension thick in the air. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Then the barn door creaked open slowly. Lily held her breath. She couldn't see who it was from her hiding place, but she could hear the person breathing. The soft shuffle of boots on the floor told her they were moving inside. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what to do. Should she run? Should she scream? But the one thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't stay hidden forever. The person was getting closer. Lily could feel their presence, like a shadow creeping toward her. Then suddenly Bolt growled, low, deep, and menacing. The person stopped. "Bolt?" The voice was familiar. It was Mr. Grayson. Lily's heart sank. She'd been hoping to avoid him, but it seemed he was too close now. She had to act fast. Before Mr. Grayson could take another step, Lily bolted from behind the crates, pulling Bolt with her. She ran toward the barn door, but Mr. Grayson's voice stopped her in her tracks. "You can't escape, Lily," he called, his voice dark and cold. Lily froze. How did he know her name? How did he know she wasn't just some lost girl? His words sent a wave of fear through her, but she didn't have time to think. She had to get out. Without another thought, she turned and ran for the exit, Bolt close behind her. But as she reached the door, she stumbled. Something grabbed her ankle. Lily screamed, her heart racing, but she didn't fall. She kicked out, trying to free herself from whatever had caught her. It was Mr. Grayson's hand, clutching her leg with an iron grip. "Stop, Lily!" he shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "You don't know what you're getting into." Lily struggled, but his grip tightened. She could feel his breath on her skin, cold and heavy. Then she heard a growl, a sound that seemed to come from the deepest part of the barn. Bolt lunged at Mr. Grayson. With a force that surprised even Lily, Bolt sank his teeth into Mr. Grayson's arm. The old man cried out in pain, releasing Lily's ankle. She scrambled to her feet, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Run!" she shouted to Bolt. Without hesitation, Bolt grabbed her sleeve in his mouth, pulling her toward the door. They both sprinted out of the barn, not looking back. Lily didn't stop until they reached the edge of the woods, the house just visible in the distance. She was gasping for breath, and Bolt was beside her, his body still tense, eyes darting back toward the barn. They were safe for now, but Lily knew this wasn't over. Mr. Grayson wouldn't stop. He hadn't been watching her for years just to let her go now. She looked at Bolt, her heart full of gratitude. He had saved her. He had protected her when she couldn't protect herself. The bond between them was stronger than words. As they walked back to the house, Lily felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was finally coming to light. Mr. Grayson's dark secrets were exposed, but there was more to uncover, more pieces of the puzzle she had to solve. And no matter what, she wasn't alone. Bolt would always be there. Epilogue. The police arrested Mr. Grayson shortly after Lily and Bolt returned home. His secret was finally revealed. He had been involved in a string of disappearances years ago, and his twisted obsession with Lily had been hidden in plain sight. The book Lily found in the barn had been his record of his victims. Lily's parents were shocked, but they were thankful to Bolt for helping them uncover the truth. The case made headlines across the town, but for Lily, it wasn't about the attention. It was about the bond she had with the dog who had saved her life. Her voice slowly began to return over time, not just in words, but in her heart. She learned to trust herself again, to speak, to be heard. And every time she looked at Bolt, she remembered that no matter how deep the silence, loyalty would always find a way to break through.